Hi, welcome to section 4. Section 4 is the finishing off of attaching the clamp or collar to the hose and checking the torque and the gap. And that's very important. The torque is fixed so that you don't overcompress or damage the Wellmaster, and you have to have a gap between the edges, because if you don't have a gap, then that means that the torque you're registering is just a clamping force between the sides, the halves of the clamp, and not the force clamping the actual Wellmaster product. And you could be in a situation where you've closed the gap, you've got your torque, but this collar's actually loose and the Wellmaster could pull out. Similarly, if you get to the torque limit and you've too big a gap, then you could still have the Wellmaster pull out because the diameter of the inner collar size is bigger than it needs to be. So what we're going to do first is we're just going to tighten this down a bit more. Again, doing the back ones as well as the front ones in turn. It's always hardship when you're doing that. Okay, and then I'm going to press to do that side. Okay, and then finally a bit more on this one. We're using this type of just ratchet drive just to give us a quick initial bit before we go to the torque wrench. But then when we get reasonably close, we swap, and we're now going to use our torque wrench for tightening. So what do we set our torque wrench to? All the details are in the installation manual. So we look down, we're using a 3-inch Wellmaster with a 3-inch coupling, so it's telling you that it's 14 Newton meters. So it's in the demonstration page in the manual. And this is our new edition 4 manual, which has only just been released. So you set your torque wrench to the 14 Newton meters, and then you continue tightening in the same way as before. So small amounts and on both sides. So we continue to tighten, again in sections. Now, did you hear that click? So that means that we're getting very close to our final torque. What you want to do is, wherever possible, the gaps are very similar. So don't necessarily just tighten one side up. Click on that one. Click on that one, and a click on that one. Okay, let's have a final check. Okay. So in theory, we've now tightened all our 4 bolts to the correct torque, and we're still showing a gap. But we do need to check that gap against the book. For that, we use a set of gap gauges or feeler gauges, metric ones, and what you're looking for is you need to have a gap all the way across on both sides, and that gap to be greater than 0.1 of a millimetre, and ideally somewhere between 0.5 and 1 millimetre. On a size like 3 inch, you don't really want it much more than a millimetre. If you're doing a bigger size, there's a little tolerance and maybe to 1.2. But you try and aim for round about a millimetre or slightly less. So I have a 0.5 and a 0.4, so I've got a 0.9. That just goes in there and then it gets tight, so I'm going to change that 0.4 to a 0.3. So that gives us a 0.8 millimetre measurement. And that's a nice fit in there and in the middle between the two bolts and also at this side. Okay, so that's ideal. I'll just check the underside the same. Underside is slightly bigger, so I'm going to go back to our 0.9, and 0.9 is a good fit on that side. So I've got 0.8 this side, 0.9 that side, very close together. The torque is correct, so that is now a fitted Wellmaster coupling. And that's the end of section 4.